Greetings, fellow Ambazonians. This one is Capo Daniel, the chairman for the Ambazonian People's Right Advocative Platform. Today, I want to bring una an AI translation. That means say na a publication where I don't use artificial intelligence for translate them for English. The one a research work on Ambazonia, an in-depth study where a reputable researcher will be qualified, it then publish them. The official, when a researcher, in name na Alex Posel, na a junior intelligence analyst, a specialist in West Africa and the Sahel region. He get a BA in international politics with French from the University of London Institute of Paris. He also currently pursue a MA in international affairs, specialized in espionage, surveillance at King's College London. His research work them include African security affairs, counterterrorism, counter-espionage, and military defense intelligence. So make una listen for this audio very well. It be very educative. It be based on analysis the way it be seen as almost facts by the international community and many other researchers them. I hope so una go benefit from this knowledge. Una listen for the audio. God bless una.
Alex Purcell, November 28, 2023. What's in a name? Amba Boys is a catch-all term under which a coalition of separatist rebel groups operate in Cameroon. They routinely engage in an armed confrontation with the Cameroonian security services and constitute a serious impediment to peace and development in the northern part of the country. The canopy Amba Boys stems from Ambazonia. In 1984, Gwarji Dinka, a long-time radical activist of the Anglophone movement, unilaterally changed the name of British Southern Cameroon to Ambazonia. To avoid assuming a colonial name, he forged Ambazonia out of the geographical name of the Ambaz Bay located in the southwest, formerly a settlement of freed slave source. When the separatist cause turned into open conflict in 2016, most armed groups simply copied the naming convention of Nigeria's Delta Boys and subsequently baptized various rebel gangs as Amba Boys. Amba Boys can refer to any armed group operating for the sake of Ambazonian independence. As a result, they are all loosely federated by the idea of gaining independence, but differ in direction of command structures, sponsorship, fighting skills, as well as weaponry and their relationships to the population. On the ground, Amba Boys in the same chain of command adopt locally relevant names. An example is the Red Dragons. They operate under the interim government led by Samuel Sako in the Libyalam division. In Bafut, local communities call them the Seven Carta. They are the mountain lions in Fako and the vipers in Babanki. Other broad groups with local representation include the Ambazonia Defense Forces ADF, Ambazonian Restoration Force SARFA, Southern Cameroon Defense Forces SACADF, an Amba Boy affiliated with the Ambazonia Military Forces AMF is photographed with a pump-action rifle. Fig.1 An Ambazonian Military Force AMF Rebel, photographed with a pump-action rifle credit to Gareth Brown. 2.0 Planting the Seeds Historical Roots of Amba Boys. Following German colonial rule, the 1919 League of Nations mandate divided Cameroon. It later became a untrusteeship in 1946, administered by Britain and France. After the formal decolonization process and termination of the trusteeship in 1961, source Anglophones participated in an unorganized constitutional referendum to decide whether British Southern Cameroon would be administered by Nigeria or French Cameroon. With no possibility of secession, Northern Cameroon was ceded to Nigeria and the south was absorbed into French Cameroon. Source British Cameroonians believed that the federal governing arrangement would afford them sufficient political and cultural autonomy. Instead, they experienced cultural assimilation and increased centralization. The Francophone majority, who constitute around 80 of Cameroon's estimated 20 population, sidelined the Anglophone regions to near insignificance in the post-colonial state. Since the establishment of a unitary, centralized state named the United Republic of Cameroon in 1972, Anglophones continue to resist the perceived erosion of their cultural heritage identity source. In 1984, current President Paul Biya cemented the marginalization of Anglophones. He did so by renaming the country La République du Cameroun, a reference to the French-administered untrusteeship territory. 2.1 Seeds of Discontent. In response, a school of thought emerged amongst detractors of La République. It claimed that the unorganized plebiscites were null and that South Cameroon became a state of its own in 1961. These culminated, in the 1990s, into the formation of the Southern Cameroon's National Congress. However, the Congress was unable to address the grievances from an emergent radical sect who sought the restoration of Southern Cameroon independence outright instead of restoring the federal system source. It was against this backdrop that Gorgui Dinka violently opposed to any venture that sought to keep British and French Cameroon as one state, deviated from the already existing name to call the area Ambazonia. He championed the acerbic claim that French Cameroon usurped Ambazonia's independence. Continuous state paralysis, democratic scandals, rigged elections, and state nonchalance pushed South Cameroonians to the fringes of society. Swaths of youths from the northwest and southwest feel increasingly cheated by the government. Youth indictment of Biya's government is attributed to the following causative factors. Forceful admission to the public service through training schools like National School of Administration and Magistracy (NAM), corruption, electoral irregularities, inept governance, austerity, and high unemployment, concessions or compensation schemes based on affiliation to the ruling party. See Biya's 2020 decentralization scheme source. More than 3 years after the Anglophone crisis erupted, Biya signed a decree authorizing indirect regional council elections in the western regions as part of a 1966 constitutional reform source. The action was believed to appease separatists, but its reception was overwhelmingly hostile, particularly amongst those who believed it merely symbolic source. Failure to follow through on the reconstruction and development of the Northwest and Southwest regions source announced in 2020 source. 2.2 Fertile ground, Ambazonia's conception. There are a growing number of separatist propaganda channels and community mobilization efforts. In 2017, separatist leaders outside of Cameroon created the Ambazonian Broadcasting Cooperation ABC source. The ABC became a vector of pro-separatist disinformation, routinely issuing signed fake communiques from authorities. Not least, it utilized photos from other countries, photoshopping cropping them to seemingly depict the maltreatment of South Cameroonians source. By virtue of disinformation campaigns, mass enlistment into the war enterprise was most pronounced amongst unemployed young men from rural areas of South Cameroon, including Ewe, Fruawa, Benehundo, Aniajua, Mukiji, Huahua, Mayaman, Sorors. With only 1/5 of the working population employed source, the ABC and similar outlets created a vitrine of hope and immediate employment amongst young men, whose prospects on the labor market in French Cameroon were considerably dim. In addition, it should also be noted that Amba boys do hold legitimate grievances with Biya's government. Amnesty International equally found that Cameroonian security forces commit human rights violations against Amba boys and civilians. This includes unlawful killings, sexual violence, and the destruction of houses. Of particular significance, Cameroonian security forces also harass and detain those speaking out about the crisis source. 3.0 Hook, line, and sinker recruitment of Amba boys. Amba boys instrumentalize social media for radicalization and enlistment schemes. Common platforms include Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, YouTube, blogs and vlogs. It is commonplace for Amba boys and their sympathizers to propagate war as a religious struggle. In so doing, they often deploy decontextualized biblical and Quranic verses to justify their means of actions. For those who profess belief in the African traditional religion, Amba boys offer incantation and mythical protection, Odeshi charms, fetishes, and amulets as ready gods of protection source. This video circulating Facebook shows Field Marshal FM Clement Mbashi, better known by his nom de guerre, General No Pity. He is celebrating the alleged death of 9 Cameroonian soldiers and Njit upon at his hand. He is further heard saying, "Only God can destroy me, no man can destroy me." This video was posted by Amba Breaking News, which, as established, is likely to disseminate false or altered information. However, it does bear testament to a shrewdly directed recruitment campaign. Be it Odeshi, Christian, or Islamic, religion is not what determines the political means chosen for reaching an end. Instead, Amba boys routinely compound ambitions of regional domination with their weaponization of religion in pursuit of their political ends. An Amba boy affiliated with the Ambazonia Defense Force ADF photographed with a machete and a revolver. Fig. 2 An Ambazonia Defense Force rebel, photographed with a machete and a revolver. Credit Gareth Brown. 4.0 Recruitment and Leadership. Amba boys are forcefully or voluntarily recruited. In 2020, AUSTO's report on human rights practices found that Ambazonian separatists used children as fighters in the southwest and northwest regions. Source. Further, UNICEF's humanitarian report on Lake Chad Basin crisis noted that children faced a potential recruitment into non-state armed groups and SAG's. Source. Of particular significance, OCHA noted that young men and boys are at risk of forced recruitment in the southwest and northwest regions as ground rebels. The same source also recorded cases of girls forcibly recruited by Amba boys to serve as fighters, sex slaves known as bushwhackers and messengers. Source. Most rebel leaders are based abroad. In contrast, the Amba boys overwhelmingly constitute the forces on the ground, relying on those abroad for funding, propaganda, and doctrinal leadership. With over people internally displaced. Source. Insurgent recruits are in no short supply. The forces on the ground that owe allegiance to foreign commandeering include the restoration forces such as British Southern Cameroon's Restoration Forces BSERF, Ambazonian Defense Forces ADF, Southern Cameroon Defense SOCADF. 4.1 A sustainable endeavor. Amba boys are forcibly enlisted into the Amba forces, or they do so voluntarily on very misleading premises. Although motivations for enlisting are variable to each Amba boy, we identified 5 key determinants that undergird Amba boys' expectations. A belief in the infallibility of Odeshi. The War of Independence is advertised as short-lived, with decisive victories during which anything lost will be compensated. In 2017, the Anglophone case was priority among cases to be handled by the UN. Amba boys are led to believe that the UN supports their school boycotts. They believe the UN will send troops in support of their war of liberation against the République du Cameroun. Due to ghost town and lockdown schemes, in addition to the blockade of companies such as the Cameroon Development Corporation and National Oil Refinery, the Cameroon Army is believed weak. They will receive financial recompense from funding schemes led by the diaspora. 5.0 Use of Odeshi charms. To retain the Amba boys' full engagement into war, they are encouraged, upon recruitment, to indulge themselves in spiritual schemes. For non-Muslim and non-Christian Amba boys, these schemes often invoke the efficacy of African ancestors and other mystical paraphernalia to fortify themselves. To ensure total submission, the recruitment of Amba boys follows a series of initiations/incantations during which they regale themselves in Odeshi charms. See Fig. 3 Traditional medicine men and healers typically produce these charms, believing their ability to make combatants' bodies impenetrable to bullets. Source. Each charm is thought to produce a specific effect, such as invisibility of the wearer or the jamming of the opponent's gun. For Odeshi to be effective, adherence follows certain prerequisites, such as avoiding certain foodstuffs such as palm oil or okra or fighting a righteous cause source. Of note, Amnesty International's inquiry found that Odeshi practices forbid Amba boys from carrying metal objects, keys, or coins, believed to attract bullets. Further, Amba boys tie red pieces of cloth to their arms, weapons, waist, and head. See Fig. 4, source. 5.1 Infallibility of Odeshi. During this video, posted by a YouTube channel representing Ambazonia fighters, an Odeshi ritual is performed. Within the ritual, an Amba boy strikes another with a machete to test the efficacy of the charm and purportedly leaves him unscathed. Viewed thus, a firm belief in a culmination of supernatural forces, amulets, and fetishes has very high propensities to decide the fortunes of war. Coupled with the consumption of drugs, alcohol, and doping pills, religious fervor gives disparate rebels a sense of themselves in a shared political community. Not least, the invincibility of each Amba boy is directly proportional to the number of fetishes/amulets they possess, along with the number of fraternities of which they have membership source. As a result, competition for esteemed titles is fierce within the ranks of Amba boys. Many appropriate themselves with illusory appointments such as generals and commanders based on the gratification of crimes committed against the military or the people. An Amba boy adorned in Odeshi charms. Fig. 3 An Amba boy adorned in Odeshi charms. Credit to Gareth Brown. 6.0 News means for the same ends. Groups under the Amba boys title commit serious abuses and violations, including kidnapping for ransom, beheading, killing of their own, armed robbery, rape, torture, violence against community projects, attacks on civil and military installations, stores. Amba boys do not distinguish between military combatants and ordinary civil servants. They subsequently perceive black-legged ordinary citizens they consider to be associated with the government as legitimate targets. For their part, government forces often terrorize the population in search of Amba boys. A common government tactic is bouclage. Security forces will close a section of a city/village/town, search all houses, and arrest those who appear to look suspicious. Amba boys are synonymous with high rates of substance abuse such as marijuana and tramadol and the consumption of alcoholic beverages/high whiskey. It renders them vulnerable to military incursions due to poor or slow reflexes. Yet despite the intensity of violence, destruction to infrastructure, and the expanse of civilian casualties, some Cameroonians hold positive views of Amba boys and perceive them as less abusive than the security forces. In the forefront, one rebel is wearing a goat's tail with a machete discreetly tucked away. Another is holding a revolver bound in red cloth. Fig. 4 In the forefront, an Amba boy is wearing a goat's tail with a machete tucked away. Another is holding a revolver bound in red cloth. Credit to Gareth Brown. 7.0 Diaspora in trouble? The diaspora refers to those who do not live in Cameroon but remain committed to the war. The composition of the diaspora features several disparate Amba factions, each pursuing its own agenda and most often hostile to one another. These hostilities often culminate in bloody massacres amongst their forces on the ground, known as Ground Zero. Cases include the Kamba Massacre, the Mayuka Massacre, and the Guzang Massacre. Of note, Amba General Chanchat of the Buiv Restoration Forces was accused of arresting and killing 23 ADF combatants, including General Fawn in the 2020 Buiv Massacre. Although engaged in the same mission, Amba boys are fiercely protective of their territory. Amba boys consider any infringement or trespass by other groups as an act of war. Such fratricidal warfare is a consequence of rivalries between two pairs of protagonists. One formed of Samuel Icom Sako and Chris Anu, based in the US. The other, consisting of Ayaba Cho Lucas and Julius Nye, based in Europe. The first of these, Sako Anu, control roughly 10 militias under the interim government. This includes the Red Dragons, the Bui Restoration Forces, and the Buffaloes of Bali Nyanga, among others. The second pair, Ayabacho/Nia, lead the Ambazonia Defense Forces ADF via the Ambazonia Governing Council, of which Ayabacho is the president and Julius Nia, the vice president. 7.1 Splinter Groups or Splintering Groups. In addition, the Coalition for Dialogue and Negotiations in Toronto, 2021 demonstrated such fratricidal rivalries. Ayabacho/Nia agreed to participate in talks with Cameroon's government. However, Sako Anu decided to boycott. In 2019, when Sako Anu participated in the mediation attempt headed by Switzerland and the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, Ayabacho/Nia did not. Further, Cameroonian authorities routinely use these internal divisions to claim they do not know with whom to negotiate and continue military operations. Source. Further, the diaspora's promises of funding do not always materialize for their forces on the ground. Several funding conventions held across Europe and America meant to acquire weapons were embezzled instead. Source. In a Facebook video posted by the Cameroon News Agency in 2021, General Nambert, a former Ambo boy, states that the armed struggle is an exercise in futility. He bemoans the in-house fighting that stymies the struggle. He further reveals that the diaspora routinely promises arms and boasts their weapons arsenal across social media, but they seldom reach the Amba boys on the field. In addition, the internecine rivalries amongst Amba boys often lead some disparate factions to strike deals with the Cameroonian military. Some factions leak the supply routes camps of their counterparts. It often results in the seizure of weapons and route raids and the burning of camps. Source. 8.0 Conclusion. Fall of the Amba boys. The phenomenon of Amba and Amba boys predates 2017. Low-level resistance, peaceful protests, and lobbying/advocacy formally characterized the Ambazonian cause. However, in 2017, the Amba boys became synonymous with armed resistance against the Cameroonian military. Once recruited, blind submission in Odeshi, substance abuse, and illusory superior titles reinforced belief in the utopic state of Ambazonia, an attractive alternative to La République du Cameroun. However, inept leadership and misdirection in command devolved into the existence of disparate, warring factions. With some Amba boys now possessing a cathartic attachment to violence, the political project of an independent state of Ambazonia is a distant reality. Tags Amba boys Ambazonian Blofon Chris Cameroon. Alex Purcell. Alex is a junior intelligence analyst specializing in West Africa and the Sahel. She holds a BA in international politics with French from the University of London Institute in Paris. She is currently pursuing an MA in International Affairs, specializing in espionage and surveillance at King's College London. Her research interests include African security affairs, counter-terrorism, counter-espionage, and military